So if we move a little bit further in time, you understood, both of you understood that, okay, this could take off. This could actually scale up in a big way. And then from being a startup where I've been in lots of startups, everybody knows everything and you can pitch in and do everything, and you never have to have meetings because you have a constant meeting all the time, and then suddenly you have to be more people that could be in a meeting. How did that change you and your leadership? How did you yourself reflect on that change, that you're saying that, okay, we have to hire a lot of people? If we start with you, in that moment when you understood, okay, we could really, really scale it up, what did you have to do?
Well, hello. I started business administration here at Lund, only for a short period. I did what was called the Sommaruniversitetet at the time.
Yeah.
So they told about the optimal business sizes. And they took the example, a company up to 10, when like it's a meeting all the time, everyone knows what's going on. When it comes to the size of 20, 25, it becomes really, really difficult. And I certainly saw that. And basically the advice was grow to 50. And we could clearly see that when we grew to 50, then you had people specialized enough. So not a lot of stuff, was falling between the chairs. And then, companies like Bertinge Hogsved in Hoga, he's notorious for this. He builds his company so that it's only groups of 50.
Yeah.
And he's very strict on that. And it actually works quite well. So anyway, then we grew up even more. And guess what? Our subsidiaries, they see all the same problems.
Yeah.
So initially, they were small. Then we had the US one, which grew at a peak to 80 back in 2000. It was scaled back. And today, now we have more than 500 people in the US. We actually have 6 regional offices, which are roughly 50 people each. So we try, to a certain extent, except the headquarter, where I can meet a guy. He says, I'm the manager of this division here. We do blah, blah, blah. And I can say to myself, I didn't know that we had such a division.
But how did that change you as a team leader? Because you were still managing this team to grow. How did you have to change yourself or your leadership methods?
So the Axis leadership method is really the corporate culture.
Yes.
And we spend a lot of time and efforts on that. And that was something we learned. We set up, like all Swedish companies, people, we have blue eyes. We want to set up an office in the US. And that's usually not a very good idea. I learned that from Bo Håkansson, who some of you may remember, a notorious businessman here from Lund. He said, if you want to do business in the US, begin by Denmark. Because if you can do business in Denmark, then you may be able to do it in the US. We did the same. We failed. We hired an American guy. He had background in the industry. He knew everyone. He was Mr. Right for selling our stuff in the US. Guess what? We didn't sell much.
No.
Then we set up an office in Tokyo. So Michael and I, we travel a lot to Japan. Michael, he lived there for like 2 months. And we made sure to hire right people. And without knowing, they had the same corporate culture as Michael and I. And actually one of them still works for Axis in Japan. So we built up from that and we realized, hey, we got the same culture. So that's when we started focusing that. And using the culture as the way to grow, I think has really been the success formula.
And did you construct it or did you analyze it?
No,
this is our culture.
You can never construct a culture. That's impossible. So it obviously reflects very much how Michael and I were as individuals, because at that time Keith had actually left. So that's really how we built up. And the funny thing is that the culture, you feel it when you visit a subsidiary. It's always a leading indicator for sales. So if the culture is really well, then you know this is going to perform well. If you feel like, what? Then you know this is going to be some issues here.
But how would you describe it?
So, I can make a long presentation on that.
But
we have basically 3 core values, which we try to follow. We call them always open, act as one and think big. And think big is for scalability, for growing up, for building the structures, right? And of course, it's also easy to think too big. So sometimes we do that when we do internal projects.
Right. So and if we go to Pierre, you also, at one time or another, you realize that, okay, this will really take off. Now it's our time. How did that, were you also into the culture directly, or how did you organize yourself, the team and you, yourself as a leader? Do you know?
Well, I think the word culture or the culture is key. Is key in everything you do. I mean, it's a key success factor, and if you ignore it, you will be dead one way or another. So I understood that one of the problems that happens to company is when you don't distinct yourself from the company. So me and the company are one, as an entrepreneur. So I learned that very, very early. So I started to, when you start, you're the chairman, you're the CEO, you're doing everything. So we recruited an external chairman, and soon 2 years later we recruited also a CEO. There was some problems with the CEO, because when the CEO comes in, and this is well known, the CEO comes in with his own way to do things, with his own team that he will recruit after a while, and with his own culture. So we invested a lot in telling him what we do and how we do it, because one of the problems I had as a CEO, or one of the better things, but became a problem, is that I had many hats, and one of the wrong hats that I had is the informal leader. And the informal leader that people like you, and they tell you about all the things. I mean, girlfriend problems, their money problems, everything, and you give them advice, and they really feel like you care for them. And that you can do when you're 3, 4, 5, 10. But when you grow and people come to you, and we have an external CEO, then it becomes like, whose call is this? Whose role is this? So I usually started to say, like, decline and ask them, please go to the CEO. But he didn't really respond to that. So then I had to sit in his room and explain to him what I'm doing, and so he could take over that.
And he listened?
Yeah, he listened because he cared, yes, but he wasn't aware of the thing.
But he learned from you how to do this.
Well, he had his own personality and way to do things, but I told him that this is what's happening, because I could see that this good thing could be a bad thing in the company. So that was one of the thing that also kept our team members as fighters during bad years, because all startups go through the valley of death.
Yes.
And you need to be tight people. Yeah. And for some of the people, since I stepped up and helped them, they really paid me back by loyalty and all that. But when it came to growing up, when business started going, and they could be recruited in other places. If you're old enough, or if you've been in Ideon long enough, you know that sometimes, you have a lot of science, and companies are recruiting like, I don't know what, and sometimes like they have to get rid of 500 people and all that. So it comes in cycles. And how can you keep the core people through these cycles? I think that's believing in the vision and the culture, in having a core team, and the core team will create core teams around it. I think that's key.
That's really interesting. But how many people were you when you decided to recruit an external CEO?
I think we grow up to 17, 20.
Not so many people. But because what did you want to do instead?
Well, one of the things is that we started addressing imaging in mobile phones. And then we had an external board with people who had other ideas. So they thought, why go for mobile devices when this market is not mature enough? Why don't we go to the web desktop? And some of them were investors in e-learning products like Luvit and other companies. And they say, we want a desktop product. So all of a sudden we had to build a box and put our thing into a box, and that box was comparable to Macromedia, if you know what that is, or Adobe products. And I didn't know anything about that, and that was not my total passion. My passion was for communication and all what would happen in a mobile phone. So we recruited a person who was the head of reseller in Sweden, student literature, which were the resellers of the Macromedia and the Adobe products in Sweden. And he took over that.
Yeah.
And I thought I would go with the mobile stuff. So in the meeting, he has his boxes and presented that, and I had like 20 mobile phones, and showed them what, iPads and whatever, you can do that. So this was that, and we thought it would be to the divisions.
Yes.
But of course that didn't work, because after the World Trade Center fell and all the recession in economy and so that business idea died with the boxed product. And then the maturity in mobile phones came when Nokia launched a mobile phone with a camera. Now everybody wanted to jump on that train. And then we had the technology that we've been developing for 2-3 years. I would say, hey guys, you want this? And so that took off. But it took us 3-4 years until that took off.
Was it for you essential to get that one big client on board?
Yeah, of course.
How long did it take to get them on board, would you say?
I would say we had some small projects with Nokia and so, but they were small, and even Sony Ericsson. But the big the thing is, when you sell technology to companies, there are innovators and technology companies. You're not even allowed to enter the door. Not invented here is a word. Okay, so we had to reposition ourselves as an enabler. And we became an SDK instead of a technology and a product, a software developing kit. And now they could take our kit, our software, and use it to develop their own thing. And now we were welcome to come into the doors. So for instance, I can say it, I had this old Sony Ericsson as a customer. We tried to sell to them 2001, 2003. I mean, even they started, it was only first Ericsson, then it became Sony Ericsson. And we had some projects and dialogues, and I know this 10, 15 years later that they say, well, 2, 5, 10 guys from Idaeon here.
What can they do?
We are like 3,000 people here. We can do it.
Yeah.
And what happens is that they need to do like 1,000 things in a mobile phone, and imaging came as a new thing, and they need to become an expert in that. And when the competitors launch mobile phones, then the marketing people says, we need this today. And that's where our chance came in, because we could deliver in very short time. So we had 0%, and in 2005, I think we jumped to 100% penetration in Sony Ericsson. And that, you can talk about junction, you can talk about 0 and 1.
Yeah.
And that was, one of the breakthroughs for us.
Because yesterday, I listened to a startup that they strategically decided in forehand how much time will we put to get this big client on board. This is the amount of time it's worth for us to put. And it could be 1 year or more, but they would decide in forehand how long time will we think it's worth, and then go for it all the way. Did you have some kind of thoughts like this?
Of course, we had Nokia, for instance. And we didn't know how to penetrate Nokia. So what we did is made a strategy to penetrate Nokia, and we had another one for Sony Ericsson. And for Nokia, we hired this guy who had been working there for many years. He know the organization chart. We couldn't see it. It wasn't public. But he could tell us, and he told us all about the cycles. When you purchase software, when you have code freeze, and when they sell to the operators, because the operators were the big clients, and when you have the Christmas sales and all that. So we know we need to penetrate Nokia at this time. And it cost us at that time like 100 million, but it cost us 300,000, and that was like 100 million,
And that
so
was what
expensive.
cost Nokia the company. They thought that the operators were the customers. And then somebody told them it's the customer who's the customer. And that was Apple.
So yeah. So we
They
need to-
confused the channel with the customer.
Yes.
Yeah.
You had other team leaders with you. How important was it to have a tight, like a management team or leader team? And what would you have done without them? I mean, how key is that to find other people like you that drives the company?
No, I think it's essential. I mean, we had a strong external board. I mean, pretty early, I think from after 2 years. And actually we had people, I mean, with substantially larger ambition than we had, which was pretty good for us because it helped us scale up. I remember also the most important thing was that there was a real estate bubble in the late 80s, and they prevented us from building our own house, which was certainly very good, because if we would have done that, we would have gone bankrupt. I mean, poor Gertrud Bolin, she built Skelevägen 16, and unfortunately I think that basically cost her the company.
Okay, and now you're building your own.
So now we're building our own, but I mean the calculation is very simple. If we can afford to sit there for 6 years, then the building is ours.
Okay.
That's how much the rent is, or would have been if we would have been renting it.
So it's, and you have another scale now, so it's another.
So I think it's pretty safe.
Yes. Was it always customer based for you, both of you?
For Axis, basically yes, all the time. I mean, we believed in making a profitable business. I mean, back in the 80s, there were no such a concept as venture capital. Because people were not focused. To begin with, entrepreneur, what was something you would not like to be? I mean, why would you invest in them? Very basic.
Yeah, I know.
So we built the company out of profitability. But then in the late 90s, when it was the dot-com bubble, then we started doing the cameras, but we also looked on, because everything was going so well for us. We had revenues of about 500 million kroner back in 1998 with a 20% profit margin. We actually paid dividends since 1990 or so.
Cool.
But then we invested like everyone else. I mean, the camera was only growing by 40% a year, and that's nothing. Those were the days. So mobile internet companies, they could grow by 1,000%, and they were measured on the burn rate. And that's how you valued them. So unfortunately, we also invested in a burn rate company called Netch. So we had basically to pay off all the debts for the mobile internet from the bubble. And then we had to take the company back into shape. And it was back into good shape back in like 2002 or so, when we had shut down all of that. And we started focusing on the camera. And obviously the camera has been doing really well since.